Puree or finger food, also known as baby led weaning. Strengths and pitfalls for both, and which one I recommend that you use for introducing solid foods for your little one. That's what we're talking in today's Nutrition Coffee Chat, so grab a mug of your favorite beverage and join me today. And while you're at it, click the subscription button below and the notification bell so that you get everything you need to create healthy eating habits that stick. Well, if you've been searching the internet, talking to friends and family, looking at books for how to introduce solid foods for your baby, you've probably been seeing a ton of conflicting information out there. And it's true that over the last 15 years or so, the recommendations have changed dramatically, particularly influenced by the continuing research around food allergies, how they start and how to minimize their risk for development. And that has really had an impact on the recommendations for introducing solid foods. However, since way back in 2006, when I worked at the government creating recommendations and policies for infant and early childhood nutrition, and ever since then, I've worked independently, providing support for thousands and thousands of families through workshops and through working one-to-one consulting with families. My advice regarding texture or puree or finger food baby-led weaning has stayed consistent that entire time. And the reason it stayed consistent is because the two underlying purposes for choosing texture methods have stayed the same. And those two purposes are to, one, minimize risk of choking, and two, to provide skill learning opportunity. Because here's the thing that always amazes me, is that the most complicated motor skill that we ever learn as human beings is how to eat. Yeah, we have all these celebrations, right? When baby has their first rollover, when baby sits up for the first time, when baby has their first steps. Such a celebration, yet very little celebration, at least in our culture, here in my culture, around introducing solid foods and taking first bites. Now, I know in some cultures they do have ceremonies and celebrations for that, and I really appreciate that. But getting back to the skill, yeah, it's the most complicated motor skill that we ever learn as human beings. And so we need to give babies the opportunity to learn that skill, just like how any human learns any skill, and that's by practice. We all learn new skills by practicing them. And so the way we give babies texture for different solid foods, that provides learning opportunity for that skill development of eating. So those are the two purposes behind our texture modification. And so with the prevention of choking, of course, is when something goes down the airway partway, blocks off the esophagus, and then we can't breathe. That's obviously dangerous, and so we want to minimize the risk for that in how we prepare the foods. And so we can prepare foods to minimize that risk in the two different ways, right? One way is to make things so soft and mushy that there's no way anything's going to stop and block. And that's also called the puree method. And then the other way for more firmer foods is to cut them so that they're so small that even if they go down the wrong way, they're not going to block anything. And that's the finger food method, also known as baby led weaning, or the acronym BLW. And so both of those methods achieve that minimization of choking risk. But each of them, in my experience, as I've seen parents choosing methods, lend themselves to some strengths and have some pitfalls that I want you to avoid. With the puree, the strengths are that it can provide a large range of foods, right? There's so many different recipes and you can put all sorts of things in that blender, blend it up and puree them that way. It's also a great opportunity for your little one to learn the skill of how to eat off a spoon. Whether it's you're loading up the spoon and putting it in baby's mouth, but they're learning how to close their lips and to let the spoon out, but keep the food in there. That's a good learning opportunity. Also then when they start taking the spoon, how do you load up the spoon? How do you hold it steady so that the food arrives at your mouth? How do you time opening your mouth and closing your lips and all that with your arm movements, your hand movements? That's amazing opportunity for babies to learn all of those skills. It's also a beautiful interaction when you're feeding baby, this beautiful kind of give and take and intimate moment of, feeding the little one. Oh, it's such a beautiful interaction and such an amazing opportunity for that close bonding. Pitfalls with the puree that I see, however, is that sometimes parents get really stuck in that puree mode and just pureeing everything for so long. And so there isn't that opportunity for baby to learn how to manipulate different textures in their mouth. Another pitfall can be that when you're kind of doing all that work of creating the puree, like buying all the foods and pureeing them and putting them in the ice cube trays and freezing them and remembering to defrost them and defrosting them and preparing them for baby, you can be so invested in baby continuing to eat and finish up all this work that you did. And yet if baby's really not in the mood to eat or baby is full, your agenda can kind of force them into not listening to their body signals of being satisfied. And it can teach them to learn to eat to be a good girl or good boy to please others. Not great values or things we want to be instilling in little ones. So that puree method can kind of lead us towards more that kind of overstepping baby's opportunity to determine how much they eat. Those are some pitfalls from the puree method. With finger food method or baby led weaning, strengths that I see there is that the opposite is that when we're eating and baby's just got some finger food pieces on their high chair tray, there is less pressure for them to do so much eating, right? They can control their own pace. They can do more manipulation of the food. So there's opportunity for them to learn that skill of how do I pick up the food? How do I put it in my mouth? How do I move my tongue around all these different textures? Great opportunity for skill development there. Also, a great opportunity for little ones to experience the textures of foods with their fingers before they arrive in their mouth, right? With the puree, that's just kind of arriving on a spoon and that's their first introduction to the food once it's already in. But with the finger food method, they can kind of explore and be like, oh, this food is soft, or ooh, this food is hard. They can feel that with their fingers before they put it in their mouth. So there's a little bit more preparation of what to experience for little ones. So a little bit less surprise for them there. So those are some strengths with the baby-led weaning movement. The other pitfalls though with baby-led weaning, one is that often I see when people are implementing it, when they're using it with their babies, often they're not choosing iron-rich foods. I see a lot of emphasis on like some vegetables and fruit and different grain products, but not many iron-rich foods. And so that's something to be aware of to make sure that you are using iron-rich foods if you're choosing to do more of a finger food style for introducing your baby to solid foods. And I'll include a link to a video that I created many years ago down below there. There's a link down below in the description box of finger food ways to prepare iron-rich foods, because absolutely it's totally possible. I just, in my experience of working with thousands of families, I often see that people aren't choosing those foods when doing the finger food style. Often I see people as well doing finger foods that maybe are a little riskier in the shape that they're cutting them in. And so the firmer foods totally can be great, but make sure that you are cutting them in a way that is minimizing the choking risk if baby does take a big hunk off of something. So those are some pitfalls and some strengths for each of the puree and the finger food methods. Did those pitfalls surprise you? Any of those pitfalls for either method surprise you? I'd love to hear which ones were a bit of a, oh, I hadn't thought about that, or a bit of a surprise. Share that in the comment section below. So, considering the strengths and the pitfalls for both puree and finger food styles, what do I recommend for you? I recommend that you use both. Both have strengths, right? And both minimize the risk of choking. So they're great. They both also offer unique opportunities to practice those skills. So I love both. And if I just think about, what I ate yesterday, well, yesterday I had oatmeal for breakfast, which is a puree, and then I had fish and cabbage and rice for lunch. Solid foods, finger foods if I was a baby. I mean, I ate them with a fork, but you know what I'm saying. So there's value to doing both purees and finger foods. And so I really recommend doing both. What I find unfortunate is that there seems to be this pressure to be making a choice, that you need to choose puree team or baby led weaning team. Which camp are you in? And it seems to be that there's a lot of pressure for parents to choose a side, and then a lot of judging of the parents who choose the other side. There aren't sides here. We're looking to meet babies' changing nutrition needs, to minimize choking risk, and to provide skill development. Both are awesome, and I encourage you to use both and not get caught up in all of that judgy ugliness. Ugh. If you liked today's video, let me know. Please click the thumbs up button below. I've got a couple of videos here with how to prepare iron-rich foods for your baby, both puree and finger food style. Have a good rest of your month. I will see you back here again in March. And in the meantime, have a healthy and happy month.